Hi everyone, it's John from RFM Calc, and today I'm talking about Bluepark. So Bluepark is a software as a service e-commerce platform based in the UK. It originally launched in 2004, so that's around 17 years ago now, which is certainly a significant amount of time. It's currently hosting around 4,000 stores, which is not huge, certainly a lot less than many of the e-commerce platforms we talk about, but still, a reasonable number, which is why I wanted to do this video today. And according to their website, they are the UK's leading e-commerce solution. So I'm not sure what that's based on or the methodology behind that. It could possibly be the Trustpilot reviews, which are very positive. So they're rated, I think, 4.9 out of 5, which is very strong, albeit not from a massive number of reviews. But either way, it's a long-standing platform that's certainly got a decent number of customers, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. So like any good e-commerce platform, you won't be surprised to know that it integrates with RFM Calc no problem. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Bluepark in terms of the platform in general, having had a little play around with it. We're then going to talk about how we can export the orders from Bluepark into RFM Calc and how we can then generate those fantastic lifetime value and average time between orders and customer cohort analysis reports off the back of that data. Pricing wise, just to mention, pricing is very transparent. It's more expensive than those ultra cheap platforms that are around now, things like Squarespace and Big Cartel, but it's pitched a little bit lower, I would say, than competitors like EKM or Shopify. So it's in that kind of bracket where it's certainly not massively expensive if you're generating a reasonable amount of revenue online. These are not expensive charges, but there are cheaper options out there if you're just getting started, and of course there are many more much more expensive options as well if you're more established. But it's in that kind of middle ground where there's certainly a big market and a big demand. So to start with, let's have a look at our admin panel. Okay, so I've set up a little Bluepark demo store, courtesy of their free trial, which was very helpful. So you can see here, this is the dashboard area. It's got a little overview of the store here and the key items we need to do to basically get going. Just to give a little overview of the platform, I would say it's not the most intuitive compared to a lot of modern e-commerce platforms now, which are very, very simple to use on the back end and have drag and drop interfaces for changing the template and design and so on. This is a little bit more involved. Certainly not difficult, I would say. If you've got some experience in managing e-commerce platforms, I don't think you'll have any difficulty here. But if you are just getting started out, it may be not the most intuitive to pick up, I would say. So you'll notice on the left-hand side here, there's no reporting section, which you normally expect to see. So there are some built-in reports. So under orders, we've got a sales statistics section here, which gives you a few reports on sellers and top customers and so on. And then under users, there are a few more reports as well under the site statistics section in terms of most viewed pages, referring domains and things. You can, of course, link Bluepark up to Google Analytics very easily. So that's what you typically do anyway. But there are a few basic reports in there. The other thing I wanted to touch on as well is just the design section. So if I go to the template manager here, now, as you probably will have seen on a few of these videos that I've done for different e-commerce platforms, a lot of platforms now have really made designing the site and editing the template very, very easy. They give you a drag and drop interface. You can instantly see the results of what you're changing. It's very, very intuitive, and I think that's one of the things that's really stepped forward, I would say, in the last kind of 10 years in terms of e-commerce platforms. That's not the case here. So if I go to the advanced editor, you can see it's very much a form-based system. You've got CSS here, which you can override. Now, if you're familiar with CSS, that's great because that obviously gives you the flexibility. But if you don't have that technical knowledge, it may be a little bit tricky, I would say, to set up a template on Bluepark. Well, I say tricky, certainly not unachievable, but a bit more difficult than perhaps other platforms. But today I'm going to talk mainly about orders. So if we go to the order screen here, you can see what I've done is basically put through a few test orders on the front end. So handily, Bluepark allows you to specify offline payment methods, so I can put orders through without setting up an actual payment gateway, which is good. So I've put these through as bank transfer orders. You can see if I just click into an order, You've got all the detail here in terms of the address and the email and the details of the customer. You can also see the products they've ordered here as well. And you've got all the basic information really that you need. You've got various statuses as well. So you can see I've set a couple here to completed, which means they've shipped, whereas these 3 aren't. So it's a fairly standard order table, I would say. So in order to get this data into RFM Calc, we need to export the orders as a CSV file handily, and as you'd expect, Bluepark does have a native CSV export function, which is great. So I'll demonstrate that here. So basically just click this export to CSV file button, and then you've got the option here to export either from the first order or just from today. So from the first order will give me all the orders that have been placed, and then there's a couple of options here. So you can export either just the order lines or the orders and the items. So that's fine. For RFM Calc, we only need the order lines because we don't look at product data, mainly because every e-commerce platform exports product data in a slightly different way, and many e-commerce platforms don't export it at all. So we just focus on the order totals and generating reports based on that. But I'll demonstrate both here. But basically all you need to do is just select order lines only, click go, and that will just generate a little CSV here. So you can see 5 orders exported, and then you've got this little button at the top here to download the file. And then that instantly pushes the file to the browser, and we can just save that. Okay. And that's as simple as it is, really. So that, it's great there's a CSV export option in there because not every platform has that. Obviously most do nowadays, but there are 1 or 2 that don't. So that's great. And then now I will just take you through what the file looks like. Okay, so this is the CSV file I've just downloaded. So I've saved this in Excel just so I can spread out the columns and make it a bit more readable, but this is all the same data that's in the raw CSV. So I think the first thing to mention is that the orders run oldest to newest. So different e-commerce platforms do this in different ways. Some, for example, Shopify will run newest to oldest in the export. A lot of platforms, Magento, for example, will export oldest to newest. Either is fine for RFM Calc. It doesn't make any difference at all in terms of how we are able to process the data, because we can obviously auto-detect what order the file's in. But it's useful to know, I think, structurally. So looking at the columns, you've got your order number here, you've then got your order date, your invoice date, your due date. You've also got this delivery date and dispatch date. Now that's because during the Bluepark checkout process, you can specify a date that you want the order delivering. So that's what I did on a couple of orders. So that's why you can see that's passed through here. You've got the status that I mentioned before. So in terms of completed for the orders that have shipped and pending for those that haven't. We've got a few more bits of data here. The email address is critical, so we'll need that for RFM Calc later on, but you can see that's there. We've then got all the customer data. So we've got first name, last name as separate fields. Sometimes they're combined into one, but here they're separate. Full title and full name. I think full name is a combination of that. Full title, I'm not sure why that populates with the name, but it does, something to be aware of. You've then got the address for the customer, which I've obviously filled in during my test orders, so that's there. Telephone number. There's more fields you can ask for that aren't specified as standard. So things like VAT number you can ask for during the checkout. I've got that disabled on my store. There's then this column here called delivery address. So this isn't particularly descriptive, but what this means is, if this is set to yes, the customer has specified a different delivery address to their billing address. So not the most descriptive column name, but that's what that means. And if it's blank, they haven't. So it's not yes or no, it's just yes and blank. And then you can see for this order for Keith Lard, he's having it delivered to a dog rescue centre instead of his normal billing address of the Fire Protection Services. If you know, you know. So that's there. What I would say is, even for orders where the delivery address is the same as the billing address, Bluepark will still repeat that information. So you don't have to do anything too complex on the side if you're, on the interpretation side, if you're importing this into your delivery label generator, for example. The delivery details will always be populated, which I think is, not all e-commerce platforms do that, but I think that's probably the easiest way, to be honest, to avoid any issues. So like I say, if the delivery address is different, that'll be flagged here, but even if it's not, it'll still repeat the billing address information in the delivery address fields. We've then got a few more fields. So we've got the currency, payment method, so bank transfer. I did one as check, as you can see. The payment total. You've got the order subtotal here. And you also got a bit further along, you've got the order total. So total is basically the subtotal plus the delivery and tax. So I've not got any tax set up on my test store, but you can see here I've put through a couple of orders with next day delivery for £20, and you can see the order total is 150 there with a subtotal 130. So again, with RFM Calc, when you're thinking about which value to select as the order total, that gives you the flexibility there to either include tax and shipping or not. So normally when I'm generating reports, I like to include everything just to give that most complete picture, but you do have the option to specify obviously a different column, which I'll come on to if you don't want to include that, and that data is here in the CSV. We've then got a few more fields. So you've got the IP address, which I've just blanked out through paranoia because that's my IP address, which all the orders have been placed from. And then one nice bit of extra information actually that we've got here is the device type. So most e-commerce platforms don't store this against the order. They kind of leave it to your analytics system to pick up. But what's good here is that because Bluepark is storing the device type against the order and then pushing that through to the CSV, we'll be able to do a custom report around that in RFM Calc, and then we'll be able to see, based on device, if it's desktop, tablet or mobile, the lifetime value, the average time to the second order, and so on. So that can create some quite interesting data just by virtue of storing that information against the order. So that's quite nice actually that Bluepark do that, and it's one of the few e-commerce platforms that does that. So that's pretty cool. And then we've got a few other kind of customer comments, admin comments, and so on, additional fields which aren't populated for my orders. Additions is custom options against the product, which you can't see on this, but I'll look at the order view, the CSV with the order lines shortly, which will make more sense then. But then, yeah, that's pretty much everything. So it's not a complicated CSV, I think, but it does contain a good amount of information. It's set up sensibly, I would say, to repeat the delivery information as well, which is smart. And then you've also got some interesting additional fields, particularly device type, which will help us generate some pretty cool extra reports as well in RFM Calc, which I'll talk about shortly. On top of this, I also just wanted to demonstrate the product CSV as well. So this is, as I mentioned, an option when you export. So what you'll see here is we've got, again, the same 5 orders, but we've got the order number repeated here on multiple lines. That's because, as well as the order information, we've also got the product information on this CSV. So if I just scroll across here, you can see here we've got the product lines is how many product lines are on the in total on the order, but then we've got the individual product SKUs and product title as well against the order. So that gives you the additional product information if you need it. Obviously for RFM Calc we don't. What I would say is as well, it also repeats all the key order information on every line. So things like the payment total, obviously the delivery address, the billing address, and the order total when we get across here as well. Everything's repeated on every product line, which isn't normal. So I would say most e-commerce platforms, when they list out the additional products, they'll have the order information on the top line and then just the product information on the subsequent lines, apart from the order ID to tie it all together in that first column. Bluepark lists everything, which is fine. Maybe makes it a little bit more difficult to read if you're interpreting this data kind of manually and looking at this for spreadsheets and so on. But if you're pulling it into a system automatically, it does mean that you're always going to have the delivery address and billing address and key order total information and so on every line, regardless of which line of the order you're looking at. So that's a positive, I guess. There's no right or wrong way, I think, of exporting product data, but Bluepark, I would say, do it slightly different to other e-commerce platforms. You can import this file into RFM Calc if you want. So RFM Calc will handle multi-line files with product data, absolutely no problem at all. We'll basically just combine all that information to one line before we generate the data. But because we don't actually do anything with the product data, it makes more sense just to use a single line version if you're exporting from Bluepark into our system. And then the last thing I just wanted to update on this and just mention as well, so you've still got the device type, which I mentioned before. So you've got the additions here, which on the single line file just says yes with nothing with it. But then you can see that's related to engraving. So you can see here for £10, I've ordered some test engraving on this order for a certain product as well. So that passes through to this CSV on the product-based CSV export, not the order-only export. So you get that additional information passed through as well. So yeah, like I say, I think for RFM Calc, it definitely makes sense just to stick with the single line per order format. That's best for us. Obviously, when you upload to RFM Calc as well, there's a line limit based on your account plan. So if you've only got one line per order, you're kind of using those allocated lines in the best possible way. If you have multiple lines per order, that will count against your line limit in your account plan, even though we can't use that additional product data. So this is the file to use. But yeah, like I say, it's pretty straightforward layout. Makes sense. There's one or two little columns, like I say, like delivery address, which aren't necessarily obvious at first glance what that means, but all the data's in there, and we can import this into RFM Calc, no problem at all, which is what I'll demonstrate now. So now we understand the file, let's import it into RFM Calc. So I've got my test account plan open here, so all I need to do is just create another project. So we'll call this test Bluepark. So the default project currency is in GBP. That's fine because that's what I set it up as. Now for the order date column, because we're using UK dates, it's best to force the European date interpretation. If I just go back here to the file, so if you look at order date, it's in the UK format, so that's the 3rd of January, not the 1st of March. So it's best just to make sure that we force that as the European date format, just to make sure that's interpreted correctly by RFM Calc. And then yeah, that's pretty much it for the project settings. Nice and easy. We can then go through to the project and schedule our report. So all I'm going to do is upload the raw CSV file, so not the Excel version I slightly edited, but it's all the same data. And then we can map the columns. So order ID, as we said, is just the order hash column there. Order date, I'm just going to close the multi-line version, is the order date column, handle it. Currency code, so all my orders are in GBP, so I don't actually need this, but we can specify this just for completeness. We can see we got a currency code column all the way down here, which is GBP for all my orders. But what RFM Calc will do, if you do have orders in different currencies, it will basically convert them all to your base currency at the prevailing exchange rate when it runs the report, so you can get that proper overall picture of revenue and lifetime value and so on in your single base currency. We'll convert that for you. And then for order value, so as I mentioned before, you've got a couple of options for this. You can use the subtotal if you want. You could use payment total as well. There's different values you could use, but I think the safest one really is order total here. So that's what I'll use. If I just scroll down. There it is. Now the order status column isn't actually needed. As you'll see, it's not compulsory. There is a status column here. Now all this allows you to do is basically filter out certain statuses. So if I select status here, I could then, if I wanted to, I could filter out, say, pending. If I only wanted to include completed orders in my reporting and filter out pending, I could just copy and paste pending into the appropriate field here, and you can comma separate multiple values there as well. I'm not going to do that because I want to include everything, but you've got the option there, and if you kind of forget, you've got a little bit of help there as well that just explains how that works. Now the customer ID column is really, really important because this will help us determine repeat orders and so on, and which customer relates to which order. So the best field to use for this is definitely email address, which I'll select. if I can find it. There it is. Now in Bluepark, you do also have a account ID column here as well, which is the customer account ID. You'll see that set to 0 because all the orders I placed were guest checkout orders when I was testing. You can create an account and then place an order through that. And if you do that, the account ID will then be assigned against that order as well for that customer. But for RFM Calc, really, we need a customer identifier that's available on every order. So account ID wouldn't work here. If you were forcing every customer to create an account before they checked out, and therefore every customer has an account ID, you could use that value. So in certain scenarios, maybe if you've got a B2B site where every customer has to log in first, account ID would be okay. But generally, for most e-commerce platforms, email address is really the best customer identifier to use. We've then got some more bits of information here as well. So if I can select email address again, if I can find it. Where's it gone? There it is. We've got customer phone as well. So if we go down to the kind of billing details here, we've got a telephone number. First name and last name, as I mentioned in Bluepark, these are separate columns. So some e-commerce platform combine them into one column, but not here. So that's handy. And then I think we've also got a company column as well, have we? No, I don't think we do have a company column actually. Let me just double check. No, so the company is basically just part of the address on Bluepark, which is fine. And so just to say, none of these fields are essential. All this is used for is basically we'll pull through this data into certain parts of the report. So we'll generate tables of your best customers and so on, and that will list the name and email. We'll also generate, depending on your account plan, a full customer CSV. So every single one of your customers will be listed with their name, email, phone number, company, but also their key order information. So how many orders they placed, lifetime value, all their RFM segments in terms of the different recency, frequency, monetary segments as well. Their predicted next order date, if they've lapsed, so on and so on and so forth. So you get a lot of data in that customer CSV. So these aren't used for any of the numeric data generation, so they're not essential. That's why they're not specified as required, but they are useful to show in those other reports and like I say, the customer CSV file. Finally, depending on your account plan, you can add custom columns. So I think there's a couple here that are always nice to have. So you've got, where's it gone? Payment method is always a good one. That a lot of our clients like to use as a custom column. So basically, based on the payment method the customer uses for their first order, we'll then calculate stats based on that. So lifetime value based on that payment method, average time to second order based on that payment method. Because if you're using different payment methods, so things like buy now, pay later versus pay upfront, you can then compare the metrics for those payment methods, which is really interesting. And then I also mentioned when I was looking at the CSV, the device type is a really interesting one that's Bluepark offers that a lot of e-commerce platforms don't store and don't export to the CSV. So that's certainly an interesting one I would use as well, just to create a custom column report around that. And that will allow us to see basically for desktop or mobile, based on the customer's first order and what device type they used, we can then look at the lifetime value, average order value, time to second order and things like that as well. So you can generate some really cool data off the back of that. Just to say, and this is the same obviously with any e-commerce platform that you're importing into RFM Calc, you can add your own custom columns to the CSV before you import it. So if there's extra data you'd like to report on in RFM Calc, you can add extra columns to the CSV first and then specify that as a custom column as well. So that makes it really easy to kind of add additional data to. And then I think I'll just call this test Bluepark 1. You've got the option here to anonymize customer data if you want to, so that will just hide any real names and email addresses from any part of the report. Obviously, we don't need to here. And then finally, I'm just going to tick this option to overwrite the default project column mappings. And all that means is all the column mappings I've selected here by going through and looking at the CSV before I process the report. These will automatically be pre-selected for me next time I schedule a report against this project, so it will save having to do that process again. Cool, and that's it. So now the report is scheduled. That'll generate in a couple of minutes, and I'll get an email to say the report is ready. And that's pretty much everything. So just to recap, we've spoken today about Bluepark as an e-commerce platform in general. We've discussed how to export the orders from Bluepark as a CSV file, and how you can do that through their admin system. We've then gone through how to create a project in RFM Calc and how to schedule a report based on that Bluepark CSV. So hopefully that's been useful. Thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you on the next video.